everyone. Thanks for stopping by. Boy, this last week has really flown by quick. Our first stop this week is a place called the Alaskan Birch Syrup Company, I guess you'd call it, out of Talkeetna. And it's a Harvest Host location, which means we got to stay there for free. And what they do is they make syrups out of birch trees. So they have 13,000 trees that they tap syrup out of, and they get about a half a gallon per tree per day. So you can imagine how much work that is to collect all that syrup. Their harvest is about 21 days long, and on an average they get something like 1,200 gallons of syrup when they're done processing it, etc. And the syrup is interesting because the first day, I would say the syrup to me had a very light taste to it. Anna says it was creamy. And then, then they have the second day harvest, and then days 2 through 20 or something like that. And anyways, they group up the harvest. And, as it gets closer to the end harvest, i.e. no more syrup is coming out of the tree, the syrup gets heavier and darker. So yeah, they turn the syrup they turn the syrup into spreads, beer, ice cream, brittle. It's a pretty cool place. You got to stop there and visit. Our next location is Talkeetna. This is an important spot for those wanting to summit Denali. This is the place you get your permits. This is the place you do your last-minute preparations for packing your packs. And you catch a plane ride up to what they call base camp, which is the plane lands on a glacier up on the side of the mountain there. So the guys carry with them about 100 pounds of gear, 40 on their back and another 60 in a sled behind them. And the way they work it is they actually, I'd say almost summit twice, because they'll drag their gear up to the mountain and then they hike back down and sleep the night at a lower elevation. The next day they go back to where their pack was, bring it up higher, then come back down and spend the night. And that way they're constantly being acclimated to the heights of the mountain. So it takes them better than 14 days to climb this thing. Last year, 1,100 climbers tried, and only about 50% of them made it. And the key reason that they're not making it is due to weather. So if a storm comes in, temperatures are going to be minus 35, and the winds are going to be over 100 miles an hour. So a lot of times when a storm comes in, it may come in for 3, 4, 5, 6 days, and you can't hike at that point. You're stuck in your tent. And usually they basically run out of time / food because they've only brought enough for so many days, and they have to hike back off the mountain.
Anchor attached to the mountain. So if somebody does fall, you're attached to the mountain so you won't fall off. So if you're climbing a mountain in Alaska that's covered in ice and snow, which all of them are, you would use an ice screw. So this is how it works. It's hollow. So you're just going to put a little, I'm going to let you guys try it. So watch me and see if you know how to do it, okay? I'll do it right here.
Once you turn 70 years old, that's the corkscrew for training to the wine and cocktail.
That's funny, I thought of that before. So you see the ice core comes out of it?
Look at that.
And then you have a rope and carabiner, and then you just flip on. That's how you stay on the mountain.
Wow.
So yeah.
That's when, not if you slip, but when you slip.
When you slip. So the first person on the rope team puts one in and then clips in and goes up a little bit higher, and then the last person brings the last one out.
So over the last week of record temperatures, they've had record glacial ice melt-off from Denali. So there's supposed to be a trail out in the middle of this body of water someplace, but the water has swelled its banks substantially at this point. So someplace off in the distance there is Denali. So we've gone from record temperatures and smoke to overcast, and now I'm wearing a jacket. So, you know, you come to Alaska, you got to be pretty much prepared for anything. Our next somber location was the Climbing Memorial. We read through the various plaques and you could see patterns how people had died, and it didn't matter if they had climbed Everest. You know, if your luck runs out, if the weather turns bad, many of these guys are still on the mountain itself because they're too difficult to get off the mountain, or maybe they've fallen into a crevasse and they've just disappeared. And after a lot of driving, we finally made it to Denali National Park. So the way the park is set up, you can only drive in about 14 miles. The road itself goes 90 miles, but if you want to go on that other half of the road, you need to take one of a couple of different tour buses, and I'll talk about that a little later. For hiking around the visitor center, there is a ranger-led program. There's a hike to the top of Mount Healy, which we did, and a walk to or from the dog sled demo, which we did that also. The remaining area of the park, which is huge, doesn't have any established trails because they really don't want to damage the tundra that's out there and expose the permafrost underneath.
You did not just record me. I had mixed feelings if I really wanted to visit the Sled Dogs, because I had seen pictures of them with the chains and up on top of their dog houses, and to me they kind of look sad, and I wasn't really for sure if I wanted to see that. But I had a different opinion after we went and visited. These dogs are very well loved. The park rangers spend a lot of time with them, and you can just tell how they interact with them, that they love the dogs and the dogs love them. Also, they have volunteers that come and they take the dogs for walks. And obviously they get to get hooked up to the sled. And let me tell you, these dogs love to run. It is so cool to see how excited they get. And when the rangers go to get the 4 dogs that are going to get hooked up to the sled, they all start barking, and it's like, pick me, pick me, pick me. And of course they rotate each time which 4 get to go out. And anyways, it was really a fun presentation, and I'm really glad we did it.
and handlers a big round of applause.
So as I mentioned earlier, to get past the 14 miles to go deeper into the park, you have to take a bus. So they have tan buses, which are tour-led, and those are broken up by 4 hours, 8 hours, or 12-hour bus rides. They're fully narrated the entire way. Or you can take a green bus, which is not narrated, but what it allows you to do is get off essentially anywhere you want along that road. Remember I said there's no trails? Well, the backpackers take the green buses, they tap the driver on the shoulder, they hop off the bus, and they just start walking. No trails, no nothing. They just go where they want to. And actually, that's how they issue the permits for the backpackers, is they issue it for an area. So, and they actually ask the backpackers not to walk one behind the other, but to walk side by like 12 or 20 feet or something like that. So again, they don't damage that soft tundra on the top. So we chose to take the 8-hour tour-led bus. Nothing bad to say about it. They stop for any of the wildlife. They'll stop at any of the rest stops. But other than that, you're going to have to try and get your shots, your pictures that is, as the bus is bouncing down the road, because it doesn't slow down otherwise. So that's kind of sort of bad. She'll tell you a lot of stories and keep you well entertained, but to a degree, they're just stories, though. You know, I mean, it's not an in-depth explanation of the animals and their habits and this type of thing. But, you know, I guess if I was to do it again, I guess what I'm saying is I'd take the green bus where I can get off wherever I want and hop back on whenever I want. So in total on the trip, and of course this is the wilderness, so you have to get what you get, right? We saw a handful of mountain goats. They were pretty much just specks on the side of a hill because they were pretty far away. We saw a whole ton of caribou. They were pretty much everywhere. We saw one bald eagle that had swooped down actually in front of the bus and grabbed some kind of a little rodent off the side of the road and flew 100 feet or so from the bus and was chowing down on it. It was pretty cool to watch that. We saw the same grizzly bear, I think, twice. We saw it going in with her and 2 cubs, and then I think we saw the same one coming out, but again, it was up on the top of the hill. This crazy little caribou here decided that it was going to run down the middle of the road, and it did that for, I don't know, half mile or something like that, and the bus driver couldn't get around it. It's pretty crazy. So my other tip of the day is, of course, bring a really good lens for your camera. I had 200 millimeters on the camera, and it wasn't enough. I needed something more like 400 to 600 to get even close to some of these animals because they're just too far away. If you try it with a cell phone, I doubt you'll be able to see them. So, of course, the big question is, where's all the pictures of Denali? Well, they say about 30% of the people actually get to see the mountain because of it creates its own weather systems, etc. So, I guess we're in the majority. We're in the 70% range, so we never saw it. But that's okay. We had a great time enjoying the park, seeing the sled dogs, going on the tour bus. It was a lot of fun. Our last segment comes to you from Healy. This is the bus on display from the movie Into the Wild, which was Christopher McCandless's getaway spot. He hiked back 20 miles and lived in this bus for a year. He made it through the winter, but he ended up dying in the spring thaws. And his death is a little unknown. It may have been food poisoning. It may have just been weakness. He may have run out of food and starved. But they put this bus on display here because there was actually a gal that walked 20 miles back through this mosquito-infested area to go look at the original bus and died in the process. So they decided to bring the movie bus out to this 49th State brewery so that people could visit it and hopefully no other deaths will occur. So if you like the videos, hit like, hit subscribe, and we'll catch you next week.